Thomas and Eleanor knew each other deeply. They had grown up side by side, their childhoods intertwined like the branches of an old oak tree in their village. Their small village was a place of green fields and quiet lanes, a world away from the gathering storm. But war clouds were forming on the distant horizon, dark and ominous. Soon the war would reach into their peaceful lives. It threatened to change everything they had ever known. A shadow began to fall across their youthful hopes and dreams. In those uncertain days, they found solace and strength in holding on to each other ever so tightly. The day Thomas had to leave finally arrived. The station platform was a scene of hurried farewells and quiet tears. Steam hissed from the waiting train, a monstrous beast ready to carry loved ones away. Families huddled together, whispering their last sad goodbyes into the chilly air. Eleanor stood beside Thomas, her heart a heavy stone within her chest. His new uniform looked stiff and unfamiliar on his young frame. He seemed so young to be going to war, yet his eyes held a new, somber seriousness. This moment felt like a painful, unwilling ending to a beautiful chapter of their lives. Thomas turned to Eleanor, his gaze locking with hers. His voice was low, yet it carried a firm, unwavering conviction. "I will write to you, Eleanor," he vowed, his words a sacred pledge. "I will write to you every single day without fail." He spoke this promise from the very depths of his soul, a commitment he intended to honor above all else. "I will write until I come back home, back to you." Eleanor nodded, tears beginning to well in her bright eyes. She believed his words with every fiber of her being. His promise became a fragile, precious lifeline in a world tilting towards chaos. That promise, so earnestly given, seemed to hang in the very air between them. It was a defiant vow made against the encroaching madness of war. It was intended as a small, flickering beacon of hope in the vast darkness that was sure to come. Thomas gently took her hands in his, holding them for what felt like a final, lingering moment. The train's whistle blew, a sharp, urgent sound that cut through the quiet sorrow. It was time. He had to go. Eleanor watched, her vision blurring, as he boarded the train. He found a window and waved. She waved back again and again until the train carried him out of her sight. True to his heartfelt word, Thomas kept his solemn promise. He penned a letter to Eleanor every single day. Sometimes he wrote huddled in a cold, muddy trench, the ground damp beneath him. At other times he wrote by the dim, flickering light of a solitary oil lamp, the shadows dancing around him. Often the terrifying sounds of distant battle rumbled, a constant reminder of the danger he faced. Yet despite the hardship and the fear, his pen always found the paper. He poured his innermost thoughts, his hopes, and his enduring love onto those fragile pages. His commitment to her, to his promise, never once wavered. Each completed letter felt like a small personal victory against the despair of war. His letters often spoke of the simple, ordinary things. He described the ever-changing sky above him, a vast canvas so different from the familiar skies of home. He wrote about his new comrades, the men who shared his fears, their rough jokes that helped pass the time. He deliberately shielded Eleanor from the true, grim horrors of the conflict. Instead, his words focused on hope, on the enduring strength of the human spirit. He wrote of his dreams for their future together after the war was over. He fondly remembered their village, their quiet walks through the fields. He longed for peace, and above all, he longed for her. Back in their village, Eleanor lived for his letters. Each day she would watch the lane, her heart quickening at the sight of the postman. His arrival and the possibility of a letter from Thomas was the undisputed highlight of her anxious day. A letter bearing Thomas's familiar handwriting was a treasure beyond measure. She would take it to the quiet solitude of her small room. There she would read his words slowly, carefully, savoring each sentence. As she read, she could almost hear his voice speaking to her, bridging the vast, cruel distance between them. His letters became her most cherished, most sacred possessions. Eleanor's replies were, in turn, her lifeline connecting her to him. She wrote of her daily life, of the small happenings in the village. She shared her simple joys and her quiet worries, painting a vivid picture of the home he was fighting to return to. Her words were a constant, gentle reminder of what he was enduring everything for. Her unwavering love, expressed in ink and paper, reached out across the miles, across the battlefields. It gave him courage in the darkest, most trying of times. Her letters were his anchor, holding him steady in the turbulent sea of war. He read them until they were soft and worn. Then, with an awful, heart-stopping suddenness, the letters stopped. One day the postman came and went, his bag empty of any news from Thomas. A small, cold knot of worry began to form in Eleanor's stomach. Perhaps it was merely a delay in the mail, she tried to reassure herself. Wars were like that, unpredictable and disruptive. Mail could be slow, sometimes lost, she reasoned. She tried earnestly to push the rising tide of fear away, to keep it at bay. But the unease lingered, a persistent shadow at the very edge of her thoughts, refusing to be entirely dismissed. Days bled into a week, then 2 weeks stretched into a painful month. Still, no letter arrived from Thomas. The initial worry grew steadily, transforming into a gnawing, persistent dread that settled deep within her. Each new morning brought with it a fresh wave of crushing disappointment. Each evening, as darkness fell, her heart ached with a little more intensity. The silence from the front lines where Thomas was became deafening. It was a terrible, empty, echoing space where his words used to be. She found herself rereading all his old letters, searching for comfort, for his voice. The silence stretched on. 6 long, agonizing months passed without a single word. Eleanor clung desperately to a fragile, fraying thread of hope, but fear had become her constant, unwelcome companion. She found herself imagining the worst possible scenarios, then fervently prayed they were not true. Kind friends and concerned family members offered their sympathy and support. But only a letter, his letter, in his familiar handwriting, could truly soothe her tormented soul. She kept his photograph close to her heart, sometimes whispering her fears and hopes to his smiling image. The entire village seemed to share in her quiet, unspoken sorrow. They all knew of Thomas's remarkable dedication to writing daily letters. They'd witnessed Eleanor's hopeful face each day at the postman's arrival, and then saw that hope slowly diminish over the silent weeks. The absence of any news from Thomas became a heavy burden, felt by many. Eleanor continued with her daily duties, trying to manage a smile, to project an image of strength for those around her. But inside, a significant part of her spirit felt frozen, suspended in an endless state of waiting, just waiting for a word, any word. One morning, the early sun was casting a gentle, hopeful light across the fields. It seemed at first like any other ordinary day in the long stretch of waiting. Eleanor was in the small cottage garden, tending to her mother's roses. She heard the familiar creak of the front gate opening. She looked up, her heart giving a familiar little jump, automatically expecting to see the postman on his usual round, but it was not him. It was Thomas. He stood there at the end of the path, leaning heavily on a wooden crutch. He was much thinner than she remembered, and his uniform was tattered and worn. He was alive. He was truly home. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat, and her heart felt as though it might burst from her chest. Then her eyes took in his injuries, the visible signs of what he had endured. He was pale, his face etched with hardship, but he managed a small, tired smile. It was the smile she knew so well, the smile she had held in her memory for so long. In his hand he clutched a single, creased letter. It was worn and smudged from a long and arduous journey. He had carried it all this way. He had brought it for her. He limped slowly towards her and gently gave her the letter. It was his final letter, he explained softly. As she carefully unfolded it, her hands trembling, it began to explain his long, terrifying silence. It told a harrowing story of his unit being overrun, of his capture by enemy forces, of injury, and then miraculously of a daring escape. Through it all, it spoke with unwavering clarity of his enduring love for her. It spoke of his fierce determination to survive, to return to her side. As she read his precious words, tears streamed down her face. Tears of profound relief, of overwhelming, indescribable joy. He was here. He was finally safe. They married shortly after that momentous day. Their wedding was a simple, heartfelt ceremony, filled with a quiet joy that radiated through the small village church. Their profound love had endured the terrible crucible of war. It had successfully crossed vast oceans and blood-soaked battlefields to bring them back together. Thomas and Eleanor lived for over 60 wonderful years together, side by side. Every single moment of their shared life was cherished, held precious. Their home was always filled with warmth, with love, and with the sound of happy laughter. and always, carefully preserved, the letters remain. A powerful, tangible testament to a love written in faithful ink, a love that time itself could never fade.